It seems every artist I've ever met uses a different palette of colors. Clearly, there isn't one true formula for beautiful work. But there's an overwhelming amount of paint colors that you can choose from, and you'll go crazy or broke trying every palette that there is out there. Instead, it's better to switch your focus to the overall qualities that go into a good and effective palette. Then you can customize it to paints that have qualities that you love or you have on hand or you enjoy working with. The following are some qualities that go into making an effective palette and choosing the right colors for you. The first is to prioritize single pigment colors. Some paints contain 2 or more pigments to create a commonly mixed color. Once you mix one pigment into another, you lower its chroma, so single pigments simply have more potential. And if you prioritize them, you won't lower the chroma before you've even started mixing paint. It's not always possible to avoid multiple pigment colors. For example, in the case of hues, they use multiple pigments to mimic one that is either expensive, toxic, or obsolete, so you have no choice but to choose a color that has multiple pigments. But that's why I say prioritize. It's good to be mindful of how many pigments are in the colors you use, so that you can always try your best to use single pigment colors. The second quality is to choose warm and cool versions of each primary color. There are loads of colors that are the same hue, for example, reds, but each one has either a warm, neutral, or cool temperature. For example, if a red is closer to violet, it's cool, or orange, it's warm. The best palettes offer a range of color temperature so that you can make the best decisions when you're mixing colors. And the third quality is to pick colors that together offer full tonal range. You should be able to achieve a full range of values in the colors you mix. So no matter which paints you choose, make sure your palette contains dark, light, and middle value colors. The more even the spread of values, the better. The good news is not all pure colors contain the same value. For example, yellows are a lot lighter than violets, so you should be able to make this happen just by using colors that span the color wheel. Which leads me to the fourth quality, which is to use the primary colors as a guide to color relationships and to try to evenly span the color wheel. Even though no color wheel is a perfect science, having a sense of it in your mind and being able to balance your colors evenly around it will mean you have no redundancy in your palette, because no 2 paints will take up a similar place on your color wheel. Understanding where a particular color sits in the color space means you can select paints that evenly span this range, and you can keep your paints to a minimum based on the colors that you plan to mix. You don't need to buy 2 paints that take up a similar place in the color wheel unless, for some reason, these paints have qualities that you can't find in the other. For example, one might be more opaque, the other more transparent, and you're making an informed decision to use both based on these unique attributes and not because you want to have a range of color. You can look up charts online, often on paint manufacturers' websites, that show you exactly where each pigment sits on the color wheel or in the color space in relation to each other. This way you can see what's the closest to its complementary color in the same range of paints, or how does it sit in relationship to the others. So bearing in mind the qualities I've listed, you can put together a unique and personalized palette that will still be just as effective and just as useful as you need it to be. If you study the palettes of famous artists through history, you'll see that no 2 are alike, and yet they all share the qualities I've mentioned. But a great example of all these qualities in one effective palette is the Zorn Palette. It's a limited earth palette of just titanium white, cadmium red, yellow ochre, and ivory black. All these colors are single pigment colors. This is also considered a primary palette, as black reads as blue when it's on the canvas and in its mixing undertones. It spans the color wheel evenly, and it includes 4 colors that really evenly span a tonal range from white to black, high value to low value.